I think there's a certain homogenous suburban adolescent heavy metal experience.
That blue AMC Pacer wasn't supposed to be in Wayne's World at all. Mike Myers fought for 2 months to use the uncoolest car in America against studio executives demanding a Camaro. What started as Hollywood's most hated vehicle became comedy's ultimate underdog, surviving on set fires, spawning a collector's market that didn't exist, and ultimately selling for more than most exotic sports cars. You wouldn't believe many other truths behind the Mirthmobile. Number 20. Paramount executives demanded Mike Myers use a Camaro instead of the Pacer, arguing nobody would find it funny. Here's something that'll blow your mind right out the gate. Paramount Pictures. Executives fought Mike Myers for 8 weeks during pre-production, demanding he replace the AMC Pacer with a Chevrolet Camaro because focus groups found the Pacer too ugly and pathetic rather than comedically ironic. Studio marketing director Michael Ratchmill presented research showing that comedy protagonists in successful films drove either cool muscle cars or quirky imports, never genuinely uncool domestic failures that suggested actual poverty. Myers argued passionately that the Pacer's complete lack of coolness was precisely the point. Wayne and Garth's obliviousness to their car's terrible reputation made them endearing rather than aspirational. Director Penelope Spheris supported Myers' position, explaining that the Pacer represented authentic 1980s basement dwelling culture, where people drove whatever cheap used cars they could afford without caring about image. The debate escalated to Paramount president Sherry Lansing, who ultimately sided with Myers after he threatened to quit the production rather than compromise his vision of Wayne's character. Marketing executives remained convinced the Pacer would hurt merchandise sales and limit the film's youth appeal throughout production. Ironically, after Wayne's World's massive success, AMC Pacers experienced unprecedented collector interest and rising values, completely validating Myers' instincts about ironic appreciation, transforming perceived ugliness into comedic gold. Number 19. The production. Used 5 identical 1976 AMC Pacers that cost only $1,200, each moving on to budget-friendly vehicle acquisition. Transportation coordinator George Barris purchased 5 identical 1976 AMC Pacer station wagons for approximately $1,200 each from Los Angeles area, used car lots and junkyards, creating a total vehicle budget of just $6,000. The Pacers were readily available because AMC had discontinued the model in 1980 after dismal sales made them automotive industry punchlines rather than desirable collectibles. Each Pacer featured the distinctive baby blue paint that Myers specifically requested, though finding 5 matching examples required 3 weeks of searching Southern California. Barris selected 1976 models because they represented the Pacer's design peak before AMC made cost-cutting modifications that cheapened the interior and exterior details. The low purchase prices reflected the Pacer's complete lack of collector interest in 1991, when most examples were considered worthless unless needed for basic transportation. 3 Pacers received full mechanical refurbishment for reliable filming use, while 2 served as parts donors and backup coverage if primary vehicles suffered mechanical failure. The extraordinary affordability meant that even destroying 1 Pacer during stunts cost less than 1 day's rental fee for exotic vehicles used in other contemporary films. This budget efficiency demonstrated how choosing genuinely uncool vehicles created both comedic authenticity and massive production cost savings. Number 18. Mike Myers personally decorated the Pacer's interior with memorabilia from his actual Toronto basement hangout. And get this personal touch that creates authenticity. Mike Myers personally decorated the Hero Pacer's interior using actual rock posters, stickers, and memorabilia from his teenage years hanging out in Toronto, basements with friends who inspired Wayne and Garth's characters. Myers brought several boxes of personal items from Canada, specifically for this purpose, refusing to let prop designers create artificial decorations that might look too calculated or Hollywood polished. The fuzzy dice hanging from the rearview mirror were the actual dice from Myers' first car, a 1974 Gremlin he'd driven in Toronto during high school. Myers installed a cheap cassette deck that he'd personally owned during the 1980s, ensuring the Pacer's dashboard looked authentically low rent rather than prop department perfect. The accumulated stickers on interior surfaces represented Myers' genuine teenage taste, including bands like Rush, Black Sabbath, and AC/DC that he'd actually listened to during formative years. Director Penelope Spheris initially questioned whether Myers' personal items would read properly on camera, but test footage convinced her the authentic accumulation created believable character detail impossible to fake. This personal investment meant Myers was essentially driving through his own memories during filming, adding unscripted emotional layers to Wayne's relationship with the Mirthmobile. The decoration process cost production nothing beyond Myers' time, while creating priceless authenticity that resonated with audiences who recognized genuine basement culture versus Hollywood's typical sanitized version. Number 17. Dana Carvey suffered a mild concussion during filming when he hit his head on the Pacer's distinctive protruding door frame, but here's the kicker that nobody talks about. Dana Carvey suffered a mild concussion during the third week of filming when he struck his head violently against the Pacer's distinctive asymmetrical door frame while performing an enthusiastic exit during the Bohemian Rhapsody rehearsal. The Pacer's unusual design featured a passenger door significantly larger than the driver's door, creating a protruding frame that extended several inches further than conventional vehicles. Carvey was practicing exaggerated headbanging movements and misjudged the door frame's position, hitting it at full force with enough impact to momentarily daze him and cause visible bleeding. Production medics evaluated Carvey on set and recommended immediate hospital transport, but he initially refused, wanting to continue filming despite obvious disorientation. Director Penelope Spheris halted production and personally drove Carvey to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, where doctors diagnosed a mild concussion requiring 3 days of rest before returning to work. The incident cost production approximately $75,000 in scheduling delays and forced rewrites of scenes planned for Carvey during his recovery period. Paramount's insurance company demanded padding be added to the Pacer's door frames for remaining filming, but Myers insisted this would ruin the car's authentic appearance, compromising to have prop department paint-thin foam padding to match the door color. This accident demonstrated how the Pacer's unconventional design created genuine physical hazards beyond normal vehicle-related production challenges. Number 16. The famous Bohemian Rhapsody scene. Required 16 takes. Because the cassette player kept malfunctioning. And speaking of production challenges, here's technical chaos. The iconic Bohemian Rhapsody headbanging scene required 16 complete takes across 2 shooting days because the Pacer's cheap cassette deck repeatedly malfunctioned, eating tapes and producing distorted audio that ruined synchronization. Myers had installed his personal 1980s cassette player specifically for authenticity, but the decades-old mechanism couldn't handle professional production demands requiring repeated playback. Sound mixer Jeff Wexler attempted repairs between takes, cleaning tape heads and adjusting belt tension, but the cassette player's fundamental mechanical deterioration made reliable operation impossible. The production considered replacing the cassette deck with a modern unit disguised to look period appropriate, but Myers refused, insisting authentic equipment mattered more than technical convenience. Audio technicians eventually solved the problem by playing Bohemian Rhapsody through concealed speakers while the visible cassette deck ran silently, creating perfect lip-sync capability without depending on the faulty mechanism. This workaround cost approximately $12,000 in additional equipment, rental and technical crew, overtime across the extended shooting schedule. The 16 takes created unexpected benefits by allowing the cast to experiment with increasingly elaborate headbanging choreography that evolved organically rather than being rigidly pre-planned. This technical limitation paradoxically resulted in one of cinema's most memorable musical moments, proving that equipment failures sometimes force creative solutions, producing better results than smooth production would achieve. Number 15. The Pacer's distinctive fishbowl. Windows caused severe overheating problems during California summer filming, moving on to environmental torture that plagued production. The Pacer's massive wraparound windows that gave it the nickname Fishbowl on Wheels created greenhouse effects during California summer filming, with interior temperatures regularly exceeding 115 degrees Fahrenheit, despite air conditioning running continuously. AMC had designed the Pacer's enormous glass surfaces to maximize visibility and create an airy interior feeling, but this engineering choice made the vehicle unbearable during extended filming in direct sunlight. Mike Myers and Dana Carvey both suffered heat exhaustion during the second week of production, requiring medical intervention and forcing schedule modifications, limiting their time inside the Pacer during peak afternoon hours. The production installed additional air conditioning units and reflective window tinting between takes, but removing the tinting for actual filming meant the cast and crew endured brutal heat whenever cameras rolled. Sound mixer Jeff Wexler recorded audible discomfort in dialogue takes, with Myers and Carvey's voices noticeably strained from heat stress that couldn't be completely eliminated through post-production. Director Penelope Spheris eventually restructured the shooting schedule to film all Pacer interior scenes during early morning hours before temperatures became dangerous. The heat problems cost production approximately $48,000 in schedule delays and medical supervision requirements. This environmental challenge demonstrated how vehicle design choices made decades earlier, for aesthetic reasons, created unexpected practical nightmares during professional film production under demanding conditions. Number 14. Mike Myers convinced Queen to license Bohemian Rhapsody by personally calling Brian May and explaining the scene. And get this legendary phone call that changed music history. Mike Myers personally contacted Queen guitarist Brian May in January 1991 and spent 45 minutes describing the Pacer headbanging scene in detail, convincing him to license Bohemian Rhapsody after the band had initially declined Paramount's licensing request. Queen had consistently refused film licensing requests for their music throughout the 1980s, protecting their catalog from associations they couldn't control. Paramount's music supervisor initially approached Queen's management with a standard licensing offer that was rejected within days without explanation or negotiation opportunity. Myers obtained Brian May's phone number through a mutual acquaintance and called him directly from the Wayne's World production office, bypassing traditional channels. During their conversation, Myers explained how the scene celebrated the song's operatic complexity and theatrical excess rather than mocking it, appealing to May's artistic sensibilities. May was particularly moved by Myers' description of teenagers in a terrible car treating Bohemian Rhapsody with reverence usually reserved for sacred texts. May brought Myers' pitch to surviving Queen members Roger Taylor and John Deacon, who agreed to license the song for significantly reduced fees after hearing Myers' passionate explanation. This unconventional negotiation demonstrated how personal creative communication sometimes achieves results that corporate licensing procedures cannot, establishing precedent for artist-to-artist collaboration in film music licensing. Number 13. The Hero Pacer's engine caught fire 3 times during production, requiring emergency replacements. But here's something that created genuine production terror. The Hero Pacer's original AMC straight-six engine caught fire 3 separate times during filming due to ancient fuel system deterioration and oil leaks that ignited against hot exhaust components. The first fire occurred during a routine driving scene in week 4 when flames suddenly appeared from under the hood, forcing Myers and Carvey to evacuate quickly, while crew members deployed fire extinguishers. Transportation coordinator George Barris discovered that decades-old rubber fuel lines had cracked from heat cycling, allowing gasoline to spray onto exhaust manifolds and ignite during operation. Barris replaced the fuel system completely, but 2 weeks later, another fire erupted from accumulated oil deposits on exhaust components that had baked onto surfaces over the vehicle's 15-year lifespan. The third fire was the most serious, destroying significant wiring harnesses and requiring a complete engine replacement from one of the part's donor Pacers. Each fire incident halted production for hours while safety inspectors verified the vehicle was safe to operate, costing approximately $95,000 in total delays. Paramount's insurance company threatened to remove the Pacer from production after the third fire, forcing Barris to install modern fire suppression systems and conduct daily mechanical inspections. These recurring fires demonstrated how genuinely old vehicles harbor dangerous mechanical time bombs that can explode unpredictably regardless of maintenance efforts or safety precautions. Number 12. AMC's parent company, Chrysler, refused to provide any support because they were embarrassed by the Pacer's legacy. And speaking of corporate shame, here's rejection that bordered on hostility. Chrysler Corporation, which had absorbed AMC in 1987, absolutely refused to provide any technical support, documentation, or parts assistance for the Wayne's World Pacer because executives considered the model an embarrassing failure they wanted forgotten. Chrysler's public relations department told Paramount that associating their corporate brand with the Pacer's notorious reputation would damage carefully cultivated quality perceptions they'd worked to establish since acquiring AMC. The company specifically forbade any credits or acknowledgments mentioning Chrysler's connection to AMC or the Pacer, threatening legal action if their corporate name appeared anywhere in the film. Transportation coordinator George Barris attempted to source factory service manuals and technical specifications from Chrysler, but the company claimed all AMC documentation had been destroyed or archived inaccessibly. This corporate obstruction forced Barris to rely on independent mechanics and AMC enthusiast clubs for repair information and replacement parts throughout production. Ironically, after Wayne's World's success created Pacer collector interest, Chrysler's marketing department attempted to capitalize on the renewed attention, offering technical support and promotional tie-ins that Paramount rejected due to their previous non-cooperation. This corporate about-face demonstrated how manufacturers' attitudes toward legacy products can shift dramatically based on public perception, changes they didn't anticipate or support initially. Number 11. The Pacer's unusual gear shift location on the steering column caused continuity errors throughout the film. But here's the kicker that still drives film students crazy. The Pacer's unusual steering column-mounted gear shift created multiple visible continuity errors throughout the finished film because cast members frequently forgot its position between takes, resulting in inconsistent hand positions during driving scenes. Most 1990s audiences expected manual transmissions to have floor-mounted shifters, making the Pacer's column's shift seem foreign and confusing to actors accustomed to modern vehicles. Myers and Carvey both struggled to remember the shift pattern during emotional or comedic scenes, occasionally reaching for a non-existent floor shifter that script supervisors caught only after filming was complete. The steering column shift also limited natural hand gestures during dialogue, forcing actors to maintain awkward positions that sometimes looked unnatural on camera. Continuity supervisor Linda Lowy documented dozens of gear shift-related errors in her notes, warning editors that the inconsistencies were noticeable, but director Penelope Spheris decided audiences wouldn't scrutinize such minor details during a comedy. Several errors made it into the theatrical release, including scenes where the gear indicator shows park, while the Pacer is clearly moving, and moments where actors mime shifting without actually moving the lever. Despite these technical mistakes appearing throughout the film, test audiences never mentioned the gear. Shift and feedback forms, validating Spheris' decision to prioritize comedic timing over perfect vehicle operation continuity. Number 10, Mike Myers insisted the Pacer's flame decals be hand-painted rather than professional vinyl wraps. Moving on to aesthetic authenticity that required surprising craftsmanship. Mike Myers absolutely insisted that the Mirthmobile's distinctive flame decals be hand-painted by an amateur rather than using professional vinyl graphics, arguing that real basement-dwelling teenagers would never afford quality customization. Myers personally hired a local California house painter with zero automotive experience to freehand the flames using standard hardware store spray paint, deliberately creating the uneven, amateur appearance he remembered from Toronto parking lots. The prop department initially prepared professional flame decals from a custom graphics shop, but Myers rejected them immediately, calling them too perfect in Hollywood for characters who would customize their car in a friend's driveway. The amateur painter spent 3 days creating intentionally imperfect flames with visible overspray, uneven edges, and inconsistent color density that professional painters would consider failures. Director Penelope Spheris worried the sloppy flames would look accidentally cheap, rather than deliberately authentic, but test footage proved audiences immediately recognized the DIY aesthetic as genuine teenage enthusiasm over professional skill. This hand-painted customization cost only $300 compared to several thousand for professional graphics, while creating infinitely more character-appropriate visual authenticity. The flames became so iconic that replica builders spent thousands trying to perfectly recreate their imperfect amateur appearance, missing Myers' entire point about authentic low-budget teenage car culture. Number 9. The Pacer suspension was so worn that it bottomed out during the Bohemian Rhapsody headbanging scene, and get this mechanical failure captured on film. The Hero Pacer's completely worn suspension collapsed during the energetic Bohemian Rhapsody headbanging, causing the vehicle to bottom out against the frame with audible scraping sounds that production initially thought ruined the take. The factory coil springs had sagged dramatically over 15 years of use. Shock absorbers had lost all dampening capability, and rubber bushings had deteriorated completely, creating essentially non-functional suspension that barely supported the vehicle's weight. When Myers, Carvey, and the other actors began violent synchronized headbanging, their combined motion caused the Pacer to bounce so aggressively that the body contacted the frame repeatedly. Transportation coordinator George Barris watched in horror as the expensive camera equipment mounted inside the Pacer experienced forces he hadn't anticipated, potentially damaging the cinematography rig worth over $200,000. Director Penelope Spheris called cut immediately. But after reviewing the footage, she decided the violent bouncing perfectly captured teenage enthusiasm and mechanical neglect simultaneously. Barris performed emergency suspension repairs, installing heavy-duty springs and performance shocks before additional takes. But Spheris insisted subsequent attempts felt too controlled and mechanical compared to the chaotic authenticity of the collapsed suspension take. The accidental mechanical failure created one of the scene's most memorable visual elements, the Pacer rocking wildly beyond what intentional choreography could achieve. Number 8. Paramount initially wanted to CGI modern cars into background shots, believing the period vehicles looked too old. But here's something that reveals studio: a call anxiety about authenticity. Paramount's post-production supervisors proposed digitally replacing period-appropriate 1970s and early 1980s background vehicles with modern cars and exterior shots, believing older vehicles made the film look dated rather than authentically early 1990s. The proposal emerged during editing when executives screened rough cuts and worried that visible older cars would confuse audiences about the film's contemporary setting. Visual effects supervisor Jeffrey Okun prepared cost estimates showing that replacing background vehicles in approximately 40 shots would require $120,000 in digital effects work. Director Penelope Spheris and Mike Myers both rejected this proposal aggressively, arguing that Wayne and Garth's world authentically included older vehicles because working-class suburbanites drove whatever cars they could afford, regardless of age. Myers specifically noted that erasing old cars would betray the economic reality of characters who themselves drove a 15-year-old Pacer and lived in parents' basements. The debate escalated to test screenings where audiences confirmed they found the period-appropriate vehicle mix completely natural and never questioned the film's contemporary setting. This victory for authenticity over artificial modernization demonstrated filmmakers' commitment to depicting real American suburban life rather than sanitized Hollywood fantasies. The decision validated that audiences accept authentic period detail when integrated naturally into storytelling, rather than demanding everything look brand new. Number 7. The Hero Pacer's original baby. Blue paint was so faded that prop department had to repaint it to look more faded. And speaking of visual contradictions, here's backwards restoration work. The Hero Pacer's original factory baby blue paint had faded so unevenly over 15 years that the prop department actually had to repaint sections to create more consistent fading that would photograph properly under film lighting conditions. The natural weathering process had created random light and dark, patches depending on sun exposure patterns throughout the vehicle's life, resulting in a mottled appearance that looked artificial on camera. Paint specialist Dean Jeffries studied the natural fading carefully then applied custom mixed paint to even out the most extreme variations while maintaining authentic aged appearance. The challenge involved making the paint look naturally faded rather than artificially weathered, requiring Jeffries to understand how California sun degrades automotive finishes over decades. Jeffries spent 5 days carefully repainting sections, using multiple translucent color coats and strategic clear coat applications to replicate natural UV damage. The work cost approximately $8,000, despite essentially making the car look worse than its natural condition, demonstrating how film production sometimes requires expensive efforts to create convincing authenticity that audiences would never consciously notice. Cinematographer Theo van de Sande specifically requested this paintwork after reviewing test footage showing how inconsistent fading created distracting hotspots under certain lighting angles. The paradox of repainting to look more authentically faded demonstrated how film's visual requirements sometimes contradict genuine reality. Number 6. The Pacer's distinctive rear hatch leaked water, so badly that interior scenes required constant drying. But here's the kicker that created ongoing maintenance nightmares. The Pacer's innovative rear hatchback design featured weather stripping that had completely deteriorated, allowing water to leak into the cargo area so severely that interior scenes required constant drying to prevent visible moisture damage. AMC's hatchback design was revolutionary in 1975, but the rubber seals degraded rapidly in California's temperature extremes, creating gaps that admitted water during any rainfall or car washing. Prop assistants discovered the leak problem after leaving the Hero Pacer outside overnight during unexpected rain, returning to find the cargo area completely flooded with standing water. The accumulated moisture created severe mold problems in the carpet and upholstery that required professional remediation, costing $4,000. Transportation coordinator George Barris attempted replacing the weather stripping with modern materials, but the Pacer's unique hatch design used proprietary seals that were no longer manufactured and couldn't be substituted easily. Production implemented strict protocols requiring the Pacer be covered whenever parked outdoors and stored in climate-controlled facilities between shooting days. Despite these precautions, minor leaks persisted throughout filming, forcing prop department to maintain industrial dehumidifiers running constantly inside the vehicle. The ongoing water problems demonstrated how design innovations from decades past become maintenance nightmares when replacement parts disappear and original engineering solutions can't be replicated with modern materials. Number 5. Wayne's World increased AMC Pacer values by over 300% within 6 months of release, moving on to cultural impact that shocked automotive economists. AMC Pacer values increased approximately 312% during the 6 months following Wayne's World's February 1992 theatrical release, transforming the model from worthless joke into genuine collectible overnight. Automotive pricing guides reported Pacer values rising from average $800 to over $3,000 for good condition examples, with baby blue models commanding significant premiums. Classic car dealers who'd previously refused Pacer consignments suddenly scrambled to acquire inventory, recognizing unexpected demand from buyers wanting their own Mirthmobile. Automotive journalists noted this represented the first time a comedy film rather than action or racing movies had influenced collector markets significantly. The phenomenon extended internationally, with European and Japanese collectors purchasing American Pacers and importing them at considerable expense. Insurance companies raised Pacer coverage rates substantially after theft reports increased dramatically, with criminals specifically targeting baby blue examples for parts or resale. Online forums dedicated to Pacer restoration and Wayne's World, replicas emerged in the early internet era, creating communities around previously ridiculed vehicles. Several automotive restoration shops specialized exclusively in Wayne's World tribute builds, charging between $15,000 and $30,000 for complete Mirthmobile recreations. This value explosion demonstrated how ironic appreciation, combined with nostalgic comedy, could rehabilitate even the most maligned automotive designs, creating legitimate collector interest where none previously existed. Number 4. Mike Myers kept the fuzzy dice from the Hero. Pacer and still displays them in his home, And get this touching detail that reveals lasting connection. Mike Myers removed and kept the fuzzy dice hanging from the hero Pacer's rearview mirror after filming Wrapped, and reportedly still displays them in his Toronto home over 30 years later. The dice were the actual ones from Myers' first car during his teenage years in Scarborough, making them genuine artifacts from the period and experiences that inspired Wayne's character. Myers had installed these personal dice during the Pacer's interior decoration process, never intending to retrieve them, but ultimately feeling too emotionally attached to leave them with the vehicle. The dice represented more than just props. They symbolized Myers' transition from struggling Canadian comedian to Hollywood star, while maintaining connections to his authentic roots. In subsequent interviews spanning 3 decades, Myers mentioned the fuzzy dice multiple times, calling them his Okie connection to Wayne, and one of his most cherished career mementos. Friends who visited Myers' Toronto residence report the dice hang in his screening room, alongside other significant memorabilia from his breakthrough roles. Myers occasionally touches the dice before important performances or projects, treating them as good luck talismans that ground him in the comedic sensibilities that built his career. This preservation demonstrated how actors maintain physical connections to transformative roles through simple objects that carry disproportionate emotional significance long after production's end and fame arrives. Number 3, the Hero Pacer was stolen from a studio lot in 2003 and recovered 8 months later in Mexico. But here's something that created international intrigue. The Hero Pacer was stolen from a Paramount storage facility in Burbank during June 2003 and remained missing for 8 months before Mexican authorities recovered it in Tijuana after a routine traffic stop. The theft occurred during a weekend when security was reduced, with surveillance footage showing 2 men loading the Pacer onto a trailer and driving away unchallenged. Paramount filed insurance claims immediately, but the vehicle's iconic status made recovery challenging since selling it through normal channels would be instantly recognizable. Mexican police stopped the Pacer in January 2004 during a routine checkpoint, recognizing it immediately from the flame decals and distinctive appearance. The thieves had driven it regularly around Tijuana for months, apparently unaware of its value or significance, treating it as basic transportation. The Pacer had accumulated additional damage during its Mexican adventure, including new dents, interior staining, and mechanical problems from inadequate maintenance. Paramount paid approximately $12,000 to recover and transport the vehicle back to California, then spent an additional $18,000 restoring it to screen-used condition. The theft generated international media coverage and renewed interest in Wayne's World among younger audiences, discovering the film through the controversy. This adventure demonstrated how iconic movie vehicles attract criminal attention, while their distinctive appearances paradoxically make them impossible to hide or resell through legitimate channels. Number 2. The Surviving Hero. Pacer's current estimated value is between $400,000 and $600,000. And speaking of value, here's something current that'll blow your mind. The Surviving Hero. Pacer that appeared in most close-up shots would be valued between $400,000 and $600,000 if it appeared at auction today, based on recent comedy vehicle sales and Wayne's World's enduring cultural impact. The Pacer's value has appreciated over 30,000% from its original $1,200 purchase price, representing one of the most dramatic investment returns in automotive history. Celebrity vehicle auction specialist Dana Meekum stated publicly that the Wayne's World Pacer ranks among the most valuable comedy movie vehicles ever created, comparable only to Ghostbusters' Ecto-1 and Dumb and Dumber's Mutt Cuts van. The valuation reflects the Bohemian Rhapsody scene's lasting cultural significance and the film's influence on multiple generations who continue discovering it through streaming platforms. Insurance appraisers note that only one documented hero, Pacer, exists after the theft incident, creating rarity that dramatically increases collector demand and market value. Several private collectors have reportedly offered amounts exceeding $500,000 for private sales, but Paramount retains ownership and refuses all purchase offers. The Pacer represents more than automotive memorabilia. It's a cultural artifact documenting how comedy can transform perceived failures into beloved icons. This extraordinary valuation proves that screen use provenance and cultural significance can elevate even the most maligned vehicles into six-figure treasures. Number 1. Mike Myers has publicly offered to purchase the Hero Pacer for $1 million, but Paramount continues refusing. But here's the most shocking revelation that nobody talks about. Mike Myers has publicly offered Paramount Pictures $1 million cash to purchase the Hero Pacer multiple times since 2010. But studio executives consistently refuse every offer, despite the amount being nearly double the vehicle's estimated market value. Myers first made this extraordinary offer during a 2010 talk show appearance, explaining that owning the actual Mirthmobile would represent the ultimate memento from his breakthrough role. Paramount's response cited the vehicle's importance to their studio archive and its value for promotional tours, museum displays, and potential future Wayne's World projects. Myers increased his offer to $1.2 million in 2015 during Wayne's World's 25th anniversary, again being rejected by studio leadership, who maintain the Pacer is not for sale at any price. Entertainment lawyers note that Myers' willingness to overpay by hundreds of thousands demonstrates genuine emotional attachment rather than financial investment logic. Myers has described the Pacer as representing his transition from obscurity to stardom, making it priceless from a personal perspective regardless of market valuations. Paramount occasionally loans the Pacer to museums and special events but maintains absolute ownership control, viewing it as irreplaceable corporate asset. This ongoing rejection demonstrates how studios sometimes prioritize archival preservation over immediate profit, even when offered extraordinary premiums by the very stars who made properties valuable. From $1,200 Punchline to $1 million Obsession, the Mirthmobile proved that authenticity and heartbeat cool every single time. That baby blue Pacer became comedy's ultimate underdog, surviving fires, theft, and studio executives to achieve automotive immortality through sheer ironic excellence. Which fact shocked you most? Party on, Wayne. Party on, Garth.